Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thanks once again for joining me for another week of this podcast. Those of you that are new here, welcome. Those of you that are coming back to listen for another week, thank you very much, as always, for your support. I appreciate each and every single one of you that takes some time out of your week to listen to this little 15 to 20 minute podcast that I have going on each week. Before I get into it, as always, could I please get you all to make sure that you are subscribed on the podcast platforms that you're listening to this on. And while you're there, if you're able to give me a 5-star review because you think this podcast is great, please go ahead and do that, because by doing both those things, you will help us get in front of more ears, or get into more ears, if you want to use that line. But I need your help to continue to grow it. So share it around with anyone who you think might get some value from it. Make sure that you're subscribed. Leave us a review. Jump on and follow us on the socials at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram and The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. And just share it around. Help us grow this thing, because when I say us, I mean me. I've been at this now for going on 2 years, and it's seen some amazing growth. And I am so thankful for each of you that share it around, send me messages of support, and continue to listen to the podcast. Now, this week, I want to talk about public accountability, because it's something that, as a coach, I've used quite a lot in varying degrees with my clients and also with myself, to try and get people and myself to follow through on actions that I say I'm going to take in order to get to goals that I want to get to. Because at the end of the day, if you set yourself a goal, or you want to create a new habit, or you want to do something new, you have to take some action on that in order to get there. And yes, there is an element where it has to be direct and concerted action, which is why I think, and why today I'm going to talk about public accountability. And I think the things that you need to do in order to maybe elicit change that you may have put off, or you may be looking for, or maybe you've tried to do it in the past and it hasn't actually quite been able to stick. And maybe something like this, as uncomfortable as it is for a lot of people, is a good thing for you to actually look at doing. Because the fact is, when we talk about public accountability, there's varying degrees of it. It can be as simple as going to someone who's like our wife or significant other and saying, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it. And I believe that you have to drill down a little bit, and you have to think about, and this ties into, I guess, the mechanics of what I do with a lot of people within our paid program. Like, one of the biggest things that I preach, it doesn't matter what you're trying to achieve, it's just building consistency. Now, that level of consistency is going to vary from person to person, because everyone has a different set of circumstances. They have a different set of time that they can allocate to things. So the level of consistency you're trying to build is going to change depending on your particular circumstances. As I go through the podcast today over the next kind of 10-15 minutes, I'm obviously going to use implementing training or changes within, health and well-being as an example, because obviously that's my specialty. That's what I've helped people to do over the last 15 years. But let's say, for example, you're trying to get back to training again. Some people may be able to train 4 times a week. Some people may be able to train 5. For a lot of people, when you're trying to get back to something, 3 times a week for me seems to be the magic number. It seems to be that tipping point where most busy people, especially dads with families, with businesses, like, they can etch out 3 hours a week if it's really important to them. 4 and 5 hours a week starts to eat into some other things that maybe are a higher priority for them. Now, obviously, we can have a different conversation, and I mean, realistically, go back and listen to the 50 plus other episodes, or probably getting close to 100 episodes that I've done. You will find plenty of episodes where I've spoken about how you can structure training programs to get the most out of it, and also why knowing your goals and what you're training for is important, because that is going to set the day-to-day, the daily and weekly tasks that you are going to need to do based off what you want to achieve. But anyway, I digress. Let's move back to looking at if we want to implement a training program for 3 days a week, which seems to be the magic number. It's a number which is achievable, and it's also for a lot of people enough frequency that it's going to elicit some form of results for them. And by implementing some level of public accountability, whether it be going and telling somebody, I actually think when we talk about public accountability, it needs to be to a group of people, whether that's a friend group, rather than just one person, because when we talk about public accountability and why it's so powerful, it's powerful because we inherently as human beings, I think most of us, unless we've got a little bit of a narcissistic trait or tendency to us, we don't want to let other people down, especially those that are close to us. And we want to be true to our word, right? So if we're going to put something out there in the universe where it's like, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, this week or next week, or like I'm going to get fit and healthy and this is how I'm going to go about doing it, by putting it out there, we don't want to let other people down. So it's creating some form of extrinsic motivation where we're accountable to other people rather than ourselves, because sometimes we will let ourselves down in what we say we are going to do all the time. So by putting it out there, even though, and there's a whole other conversation to be had here, which we're not going to do today, around intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, where we essentially want to get to a point where we're intrinsically motivated and we're accountable to ourselves rather than accountable to other people. But sometimes we do need that external accountability, because sometimes we let ourselves down on our word, and what that can lead to is a lack of confidence. It can lead to us not feeling like we are the person that we want to be, and that can feed into a lot of things when we're just not true to ourselves on our word. And it's something that I've experienced in my life quite a bit. I get really uncomfortable with public accountability, as do a lot of people that I work with. But it's something that I feel is a really powerful tool for a lot of people to utilize. And I actually think the best way to utilize it is to almost not let everybody know what your big overarching goals are. So not saying like, if you have a goal of weight loss, not saying what the weight loss number is. If you have a goal of building a business to X amount, not letting everybody, you let your smaller circle know. If you've got a coach, letting them know and helping them guide you, because that coach will be able to help you write out what your actions, habits, and behaviors need to be in order to get that. You still need to let other people know, but from the form of broader public accountability, this is my personal opinion, I don't think you need to let them know your bigger overarching goals. If you want to, that's okay. What I do think is powerful for the form of public accountability, and what I try and use within our programs, is things like letting the community of people who are on the same journey as you know what your actions are for the week. I.e., how many sessions are you going to try and get in for the week? I'm going to get 3 sessions in for the week. Okay, and then at the end of the week, by putting that out there, it's like, you know, let's say you get to Friday, you're feeling a little bit lazy, you maybe don't want to do it, and it's like, oh, I've got to report back on whether I did this or not in a public forum. And I'm not talking about a big public forum, it's more about a forum of people who are on the same journey as you are. By doing that, it's sometimes going to give you that motivation to just get over that hump, and that initial motivation to try and get you to take action on it. And public accountability is important for one. I think one reason only is because people, and as negative as this connotation is, like, people don't want to be shamed. They don't want to feel shame around not taking from other people, around not taking action on something that they said they're going to do. So as uncomfortable as it is, it's really something that I think if you do it in a very concerted and structured way, I think it's something that can be very, very powerful for a lot of people, especially in the early stages. Now, I do think later on down the track, as you get into it more and more, you do have to be a little bit careful on how you use it, because as I said, I think that you need to eventually get to a point where the motivation is in you and it's to yourself and it's being true to your word, rather than being concerned with what others think about you not upholding what you've said to them. And as dads and as fathers, like, we want to be a role model for those within our family. So we don't want to have to go to our kids and tell them that we didn't do something, and the reason that we didn't do it was just because, like, it got too hard. We want to be able to follow through on what we said we're going to do, and put in the hard work when we need to, because realistically, that's going to set the example for them. Now, there's going to be times where you're going to have to forego particular things, or maybe you're not going to be able to fulfill it due to circumstances that are outside your control. But you always want to, when you're using this form of public accountability, you always want to be real. And I think when we're using other people as that form of accountability, we're actually more likely to be real with ourselves about why we're not doing things. And I think people shy away from doing public accountability and why it is so uncomfortable, because it actually forces us eventually to look inwards and really have an objective look about, hey, why didn't I do this? And then when we look at why we didn't do it, a lot of the time, for a lot of people, I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of the time, it comes down to the fact that maybe we were a little bit lazy in that moment, or maybe it was just a little bit of a cop-out in that moment. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes you just need to get it done. And that's why this public accountability thing, I'm pretty big on it. I'm not big on it in, like, standing in the town square as the pariah and announcing it to the whole entire world that this is what I'm doing. I'm going to do 3 training sessions a week. I think there is a more measured and constructive way you can do it. And even with that measured and constructive way, and when you're doing it amongst a group of peers who are maybe on the same journey as you, so they understand the challenges, they understand the struggles, even then people shy away from it because it's like, I don't want to let those people down. But when we really sit back and look at it, I don't think we want to let ourselves down. But I think when we objectively take a step back and go, if I'm not telling anybody else, and in the reality of it all, I'm actually okay with letting myself down. I'm not okay with letting other people down. And eventually, after using that public accountability to get going and get that habit set, we need to try and shift that mindset to a point where actually I'm not okay with letting myself down. Because when we start letting ourselves down too much, that starts to feed into a completely different conversation. And it's a conversation that I actually have with a lot of people within the program. And a lot of people, when they've let themselves down time and time again, they lack confidence, they lack conviction in their words, and they just feel a little bit hollow, like they don't feel like they're really worth something. Their self-worth is lacking. And not that, and this is a very blanket statement, right? Obviously, it does depend on the context of the person's life and their circumstances. But if we're talking about it from the point of view of just accountability to yourself, one way you can start to build up that self-worth and you can start to build up that confidence is to actually follow through on what you say you're going to do. And sometimes in order to get to the point where we can be true with ourselves about the actions that we're taking, and we can have some confidence in, if I tell myself this, I'll actually do it, we need to shift first to having some level of public accountability with other people who not only can hold us accountable, but when we fall down, they can help us back up. They can get us back into the mode where we're able to continue to do it, because that's the other thing that I think people miss with public accountability is when they're scared to put out there what they're going to do because they're scared of failure, they're scared of not being able to follow through with it. They also miss the point that especially when you do it in a way where you're doing it in front of people who are on the same journey as you, there's going to be people within that group who are going to tripped and stumbled in the past, who are actually going to be able to help you back on the path and back through it, who are going to be supportive of you. And that can be a really positive byproduct of public accountability. Rather than that public shame that I think we're all worried about and scared of, a lot of the times what we get in return is we actually get public support. But that public support can sometimes be exactly what we need to stop us from going completely off the path and get us back to the path. So, the big thing is, don't be scared of public accountability. I actually think it's a really powerful tool. I think the big reason why a lot of people are scared of public accountability is because they don't want to be seen as a fraud. They don't want to be seen as a failure. But the fact of reality is, failure is part of life. We're not always going to be perfect 100% of the time. And expecting ourselves to be perfect 100% of the time is going to be a recipe for failure. It is going to lead into negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions around whatever it is, whatever the activity is that we're trying to undertake. And I think what a lot of people will find is if they actually invest themselves in some form of structured public accountability, where they are putting out their goals, they are putting out their actions, and they are putting out the things that they're going to undertake for a week or a month or a year or whatever the case might be, when they do fail, what they'll actually find is they'll find support within that, rather than finding what they think they're going to find, which is ridicule, which is shame, which is people really being hard on them or thinking negative of them. Because by putting it out there, firstly, we are accountable to other people other than ourselves, which eventually needs to be switched, and we want to be intrinsically motivated rather than externally motivated or extrinsically motivated. But secondly, when you do it in a group of peers and in a group of people who are on the same journey as you, I think you'll actually find more support than you think you will, and you may actually find that thing that you need in order to build the consistency within whatever it is you're trying to change that habit of or build towards within your life. So that's it. Get amongst some public accountability. It's something that over the years I've always shied away from as well too. Like, it's super uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable. But I think if you do it in the right way, in the right manner, it's really, really something that can be beneficial to a lot of people. All right? Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have shied away from public accountability. If you're one of my coaching clients, I know a good number of you do it, and that's okay. But maybe it's worth having a look in, especially if you feel like something's missing and you just can't quite get something to stick that you're trying to. All right. Have a great week. Thanks for listening again, as always. Like, share, subscribe, share it around with your friends, and I will see you all next week. Goodbye.